Sadly, not many photos and videos of Bruce Lee's life have survived to this day. But those that do remain inspire people all over the world. Experts, athletes, and martial arts enthusiasts watch these videos again and again, each time discovering new details that reveal the truth about a man who lived at the very limits of human performance. This truth is more terrifying than any myth. It's hard to believe that the man who became a symbol of strength and speed was, as a child, a weakling who was mocked in the schoolyard. As a boy, Bruce suffered from asthma and constantly caught colds. His classmates cruelly taunted him, calling him Four Eyes. The doctors gave in and told his parents the harsh truth: this child would always be sickly and weak. But those same words were the spark that ignited the 13-year-old boy's passion and transformed him into the greatest martial arts legend. When Bruce first entered Master Ip Man's Kung Fu school, the teacher immediately noticed something special about the skinny teenager. While the other students took breaks between exercises, the bespectacled boy continued training until he collapsed from exhaustion. While the others went home for dinner, he stayed in the gym, training by the light of the streetlights. "Pain is just an illusion," Bruce whispered as he collapsed with exhaustion. This phrase became the most important rule of his life, and also the most dangerous. Hong Kong in the 1950s was a harsh place, where street fights occurred almost daily. Most teenagers tried to avoid them, but not Bruce. He actively sought them out. Every fight was a test for him, every blow a valuable lesson. He returned home with a broken nose and bruises, but his eyes shone with excitement. His parents didn't understand what their son was going through, but even then, something was awakening inside him that would never give him peace. In 1959, at the age of 18, Bruce set out to conquer America. It seemed like a new country, new opportunities, and a time to relax and enjoy his youth. But the demon of perfection that had taken root within him required even more sacrifices. In Seattle, he opened his first martial arts school and set a schedule that would terrify any Olympic champion. 6 hours of grueling training a day, with no days off, no vacation, and no indulgences. In 1964, something happened that changed Bruce forever. Traditional Kung Fu master Wong Jack Man challenged the ambitious young man to a fight because he believed he considered himself superior. The fight lasted only a few minutes and ended with Bruce winning. But instead of joy, the victor felt only anger at himself. "So long," he exclaimed. "A real master would have ended this fight in seconds." From that day on, his training transformed from brutal to inhuman. It was then that a new fighting style emerged: Jeet Kune Do, the style of the intercepting fist. Bruce Lee ruthlessly discarded everything unnecessary, retaining only the most effective and deadly techniques. "Take what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is unique," he declared, unaware that at that moment he was creating not only a great martial art, but also a method of slow suicide. The year 1967 was a turning point in Bruce Lee's life. At an international karate tournament in Long Beach, he gave a short demonstration that shook everyone present to their core. A few minutes later, the entire arena froze in silent awe, watching a man move faster than lightning and more subtle than death. Hollywood producer William Dozier was sitting in the audience, and a few minutes after the demonstration ended, he ran up to Bruce, his eyes shining. "You should make movies." The most amazing moment of this demonstration, the one that convinced the producer, was the famous one-inch punch. Bruce had a volunteer in front of him, almost touching his chest. With his fist, with no backflip, no apparent preparation. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he flings the grown man across the room. The sound of him hitting the wall shakes the entire room, followed by deafening applause. People asked him to repeat it, disbelieving their eyes, and Bruce calmly did it again with the same astonishing result. Hollywood welcomed him by opening its doors to him, but even in the world of cinema, the artist's skills proved to be quite astonishing. On the set of The Green Hornet, an incredible discovery was made. The cameras couldn't keep up with his movements. At the standard film speed of 24 frames per second, his punches simply disappeared from the film, creating a surreal image. A motionless actor standing still while the stunt doubles around him mysteriously fell to the floor. The directors begged him to slow down, and every such request caused Bruce physical pain. He had strived his whole life to be the fastest, and now they were forcing him to move slowly. Behind the scenes, his obsession had reached terrifying proportions. 200 push-ups on just 2 fingers in one scene. It sounds like a myth, but witnesses swore they saw it happen with their own eyes. 1,500 regular push-ups in a row without a single break, until sweat was streaming into his eyes and his muscles were trembling with effort. One-handed pull-ups, hour after hour, until the skin on his palms was bloodshot. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the numbers, but his eyes, burning with the fire of a man who had forever forgotten how to stop. What astounded witnesses even more was that a 45-kilogram punching bag, capable of withstanding the blows of professional heavyweight boxers, couldn't withstand Bruce Lee's kick. One blow and the bag flew through the air like a feather, its supports torn from the ceiling with a creak. The noise was so deafening that people rushed from neighboring rooms to see what had happened. Bruce stood. There he was, in complete silence, without breaking a sweat, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. At that time, no one suspected that irreversible changes had already begun in the master's body. When you look at the legend's diaries, you begin to understand the extent of his madness. Every minute of his day was planned with German precision. 5 a.m. Wake up, glass of water with vitamins. 5:15 a.m. 10-kilometer run in any weather. 7:30 a.m. Breakfast. Only fruit juice and protein. 8 o'clock a.m. Weight training. 2 hours without a break. And so it went on until late at night, day after day, week after week. His wife, Linda, later recalled with tears in her eyes, "He lived like a perfectly tuned machine. I begged him to take at least one day off, but he looked at me as if I were asking him to betray himself." Even learning a new weapon became an obsession for him. When his friend Dan Inosanto first showed him the nunchucks, Bruce shook his head incredulously. "They're just a child's toy. What would you do with them in a real fight?" But just 3 months later, he was swinging the nunchucks with such speed and precision that the air around him was literally buzzing. In Fist of the Avenger, his handling of the weapon was so perfect that it is still considered a benchmark. Then came a video that still sparks debate about the limits of human performance. Bruce plays table tennis, using nunchucks instead of a racket, returning each stroke with astonishing precision. Many question the authenticity of the video, but those who knew Bruce personally shake their heads. They recognize his obsession and believe he was truly capable of learning this. In the early 1970s, Bruce Lee had something similar. His physique was perfect. He weighed only 61 kilograms and stood 172 centimeters tall, but every gram of that weight was pure muscle mass. In photos from that period, you can see every muscle fiber under his skin, every vein protruding as if carved from marble by a master artist. The master's body fat percentage was so low that doctors shook their heads. These values were closer to a machine than a living person. Apparently, it was at this point that his body began sending out the first alarm signals. Enter the Dragon was the triumph of his life. The first major Hollywood film to feature an Asian in the lead role, a film that would forever change the way martial arts were portrayed in cinema. But filming became a real test of endurance. The Hong Kong summer greeted the crew with 40-degree heat and stifling humidity. The studios had no air conditioning. The heavy costumes clung to the skin, and Bruce, as always, demanded only real punches and real speed. No pretense, no compromise on reality. In these rare behind-the-scenes shots, a discerning eye can, for the first time, detect disturbing changes. Bruce still looks like an invincible warrior, still exudes confidence and power, but something subtle has changed in his appearance. His face has become sharper, his cheekbones more prominent, and his cheeks have sunk slightly. Shadows appeared under his eyes that no one had noticed before. He had lost a significant amount of weight, although he was already very thin. But complaining of fatigue or illness was completely out of character for a man who had spent his whole life teaching himself to ignore pain. Jim Kelly, who played one of the lead roles in Enter the Dragon, recalled those days years later with obvious concern. During the last weeks of filming, something strange began to happen to Bruce. He had always been a demanding perfectionist, but now he became irritable and short-tempered. He could lose his temper over trifles that hadn't bothered him before, and then apologize and say he was just tired. But Bruce Lee never got tired. That was his superpower, boundless energy. Something was definitely wrong. Even in the final months of his life, Bruce trained with the same intensity. In the surviving film footage, it's clear he was still faster and more skillful than any potential opponent, and still a deadly threat to anyone who dared challenge him. But those who knew him for many years noticed subtle, almost imperceptible changes. The master's movements became sharper and less fluid. Sometimes he would lose his balance where he had once stood perfectly still. To an ordinary person, these changes would have passed unnoticed. But to Bruce Lee, a man of perfect coordination, they were a disaster. The final professional photo shoot for Black Belt magazine was intended to honor the greatest martial arts master of the modern era. In these photos, Bruce still looks like a living legend. His muscles are still bulging, his gaze focused and penetrating, his posture exuding confidence and power. But if you look closely, you can detect something new in the depths of his eyes that wasn't there before. Exhaustion? Fear? Or perhaps a premonition of the difficulties that loomed on the horizon. Game of Death would become his masterpiece, a philosophical film about a martial arts master climbing the steps of a temple, facing masters of various fighting styles. At each step, a new challenge awaited him, and on each floor, a stronger opponent. This film was the perfect metaphor for his life: constant ascent, endless transcendence, and an eternal quest to surpass new boundaries. But what if, instead of finding victory at the top, he faced his most formidable opponent, his own exhausted body? During breaks in filming Game of Death, the most disturbing changes became apparent. Bruce sat in a chair, leaned back, and closed his eyes with the gaze of someone for whom every second of rest was a precious gift. The master's skin took on an eerie gray hue, and his lips he was often dry despite constantly drinking water. Even when it was relatively cool in the studio, beads of sweat always glistened on his forehead. The assistants on the set exchanged concerned glances, but no one dared to ask the martial arts legend how he was. Bruce's wife, Linda, later recalled those final weeks with a heavy voice. He complained of a severe headache, something he'd never had before. He asked me to massage his temples, saying he sometimes felt dizzy and nauseous. I begged him to see a doctor, but he flatly refused. He said it was just fatigue from the intense filming, and that it would go away if he rested a little. But Bruce didn't know how to rest. That wasn't in his nature. One of the last photos, taken just days before the tragedy, appears completely normal at first glance. Bruce is smiling, hugging his colleagues on set, and looking relaxed and happy. But if you look more closely, the picture appears completely different. The smile seemed a bit forced, his face noticeably gaunt, and his eyes sunken deep in their sockets. His complexion was pale and unhealthy, which everyone at the time attributed to the lighting. No one would have guessed they were seeing a man on the verge of collapse. July 20th, 1973, began like any other day in Bruce Lee's life. A hot day in Hong Kong, a meeting with producer Raymond Chow to discuss details for Game of Death, and then a visit to actress Betty Ting Pei to work on the script. Their apartment was stuffy and hot, and the air conditioning couldn't handle the summer heat. Bruce complained of another headache, one that had become his constant companion over the past few weeks. Betty gave him a common painkiller, Aquagisec, which he had taken before. He swallowed the pill, lay back on the couch to rest, and never opened his eyes again. The news of Bruce Lee's death spread like wildfire around the world. The dragon is dead. The legend has passed away at the age of 32. The martial arts king died at the height of his fame. So proclaimed the unbelievable headlines. Millions of fans around the world refused to believe that the man they considered the epitome of strength and courage was merely human. The official explanation, brain swelling resulting from an allergic reaction to a painkiller, failed to convince many. Many questions, surprising and bizarre. Like mushrooms after rain, the strangest theories emerged. That he was poisoned by jealous rivals from the martial arts world. That he was murdered by a Chinese gang for breaking an ancient taboo by teaching the secrets of kung fu to non-Chinese people. Some spoke of a family curse. After all, his son Brandon also died years later under mysterious circumstances. Others even blamed supernatural forces, claiming that no one could possess such abilities without paying a terrible price. But the truth, as is often the case, was simpler and more terrifying than any conspiracy theory. Nearly half a century later, a group of international researchers decided to examine the materials related to the last months of Bruce Lee's life using modern analytical methods. They carefully studied all available photos, videos, medical records, and eyewitness accounts using the latest computer image analysis techniques and recent insights into the physiology of exertion. What they discovered prompted the scientific community to re-examine the entire story of the great master's death. Applying modern image processing techniques to photographs of Bruce Lee's final weeks, the researchers discovered details not noticed in 1973. His grayish skin tone, attributed at the time to poor lighting, actually indicated serious circulatory problems. His sunken cheeks and sunken eyes indicated chronic dehydration. His constantly moist lips showed that his body was desperately trying to conserve every drop of fluid. Dark circles under his eyes indicated his eyesight led to sleep disturbances and critical changes in his metabolism. The medical term that provided the key to solving the mystery of Bruce Lee's death sounds frighteningly scientific: hyponatremia. But the essence of this condition is quite simple to understand. The body's water-salt balance is dangerously disturbed. Imagine, continuous strenuous training in the tropical heat leads to the loss of large amounts of fluid and salts through sweat. The person then tries to compensate by drinking large quantities of pure water without restoring the salt balance. The body's cells, especially those in the brain, literally begin to swell with excess water, leading to fatal cerebral edema. Now that scientists know what to look for, Bruce Lee's entire lifestyle has been revealed in a whole new light. He would wake up at 5 a.m. and run 10 kilometers in the 40-degree heat and 100% humidity of a Hong Kong summer. He would do 2 hours of intense weight training in a stuffy gym. He would do 1 hour of stretching exercises. He would do 3 hours of martial arts training. He would do another hour of cardio. All this while eating a minimal diet and almost completely avoiding salt, which he considered harmful to his body. While he drank copious amounts of water, he paid no attention to maintaining his electrolyte balance. With this new knowledge, researchers meticulously re-examined recent photographs of Bruce Lee. What they saw shocked them. Every image portended impending disaster. Every detail of his features was a cry for help that no one heard. His exhausted body was sending out desperate signals, but he dismissed them. As usual, believing them to be a sign of weakness. He attributed the headaches to exhaustion, the nausea to overwork, and the dizziness to the stress of filming. Dr. Donald Langford, a leading neurologist specializing in hyponatremia in athletes, examined all the records and came to a shocking conclusion. All the symptoms clearly point to a severe form of hyponatremia. If Bruce Lee had consulted a doctor even a week before the tragedy, A simple intravenous saline solution could have saved his life. But he is a man who spent his entire life teaching himself to ignore his body's signals and to dismiss pain as an illusion. This philosophy made him a legend, and it is the same philosophy that killed him. Well, the most tragic part of this story is that Bruce didn't stop even when his body was on the verge of collapse. He continued training with the same obsession. He pushed himself to his limits and beyond. He proved to himself and the world time and again that human potential is limitless, that willpower can overcome any physical obstacle. And he was right to an extent. He did indeed exceed the limits of human performance. But as it turns out, nature does not forgive such triumphs and exacts a heavy price. Today, Bruce Lee's story is a must-read for leading doctors and sports trainers around the world. His training methods are still studied and applied, but today they are always combined with modern insights into recovery, nutrition, and the limits of human endurance. Experienced athletes learn to distinguish between a healthy drive and a dangerous obsession. But the most important lesson of his life remains the same. Even the strongest will cannot overcome the laws of physiology forever. Be like water, he taught millions of followers around the world. But he himself became fire, which eventually burned to ashes. Pain is an illusion, he would repeat, turning this phrase into a motto of endurance. But toward the end of his life, pain became the one truth he could no longer ignore. Limits exist only in our minds, he declared, proving the truth of these words with his life. His last photographs carry something almost mystical, a look that seems to say, "I know I've crossed the line, but I can't stop. This is my nature. This is my path. This is my destiny." There's no fear in the depths of those eyes, only a kind of sad acceptance of the inevitable. The tragedy of a genius who knew only how to be the best, even if it meant his own death. Half a century later, people from all over the world still come to his memorial in Hong Kong. They lay flowers, leave messages of gratitude, meditate, and repeat his philosophical teachings. He has remained forever what he wanted to be, an immortal legend, a symbol of humanity's limitless potential. But now we know the true price of that immortality. And this is perhaps the most important lesson in Bruce Lee's story. He showed humanity the dizzying heights the human spirit can reach, how far the will to perfection can go. But he also showed the price of that path. He became a legend not in spite of his tragic fate, but precisely because of it. For true legends don't know how to stop. They burn to the end, lighting the way for those who come after them. And therein lies all the beauty and all the horror of genius.